I'm pleased to introduce our speaker this morning. Beth Piggush is a La Crosse-based climate justice organizer, sustainability educator, and consultant whose work sits at the intersection of community resilience, ecological stewardship, and faith-rooted action, and a good friend. As founder of Green R Community Connections, she supports municipal climate action planning across the Driftless region, lectures in environmental studies at UWL, and draws on her background as the former integral ecology director of the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration. She is active in the community, supported by her husband and 3 daughters. She is also the newly elected La Crosse County Board Supervisor for District 7 in the city. Welcome.
As Susan said, my name is Beth Piggush, and I am your neighbor. I am literally Christy and Drew's neighbor, and a few blocks from Susan and many of you. So it is really great to be here. I'm here today to kind of tell a story about a curiosity that I have and where I think I want to go, and I want to share that journey with you a little bit. I had a great privilege of working for the Franciscan Sisters and being involved in many things, and then also with my 3 daughters and my loving and supportive husband. I have 3 girls. My eldest is Adela Piggush. She was the youth climate action person that had worked with Alyssa and the UU for a climate grant with the city on this most recent round. And my journey kind of dovetails with hers because we were learning things together. I also have an 8th grader who is just spicy and vivacious. Her name is Anna. And if you know her at all, you know that's exactly who she is. And then I have my youngest, Vera, who is a 4th grader. And Vera just goes by her own drum all the time. And I mentioned them in addition to my husband, Justin, because they are my tight community. And everything that I learn and bring back home, we talk about as a family. We actually have dinner together, and that is like a huge thing for us to do. Most of the time we have breakfast together too, which is an even bonus, especially if the girls are cooking. So, I really think that everything that I've been learning and questioning about is one in which, how can we do things better together? So one of the things that I had the privilege to do most recently was attend in the fall the Midwest Climate Resiliency Conference, which was in Milwaukee. And this had a number of states participating. I was there actually with your Alyssa Remsburg talking about land justice and the importance of place. We also had Minan with us from Giashia and Vicky from UWL talking about how we all have a connection to place. Adela, my eldest, who did the project with the support of the UU for the climate grant with the youth, actually presented her first poster regarding a previous project with the Friends of the Marsh and doing some QR codes. But together, we actually attended workshops about what builds a resilient community. And as people of faith, we know what we need. And for myself, I need a house of worship. I also need a public library. I need parks, and I need neighbors. And I feel like I have all of that here in La Crosse. We have lived here for 16 years, and it has been the best time not knowing anything about La Crosse, but knowing now that we don't want to leave. So in the attendance of this conference, one of the many things that we were learning, Adela and I, was regarding every language that people are using from a mayor or a state representative perspective of being prepared and having an economic development plan, a comprehensive plan, climate action plan, economic justice plan, community health plan, to actually hearing from the people that were working on these plans, whether they realized it or not. So the beauty of this is that we all, I think, have the same goal in common. But what we call it and how we get to that position can be many different things. And that's when a light bulb went off for me in that, wait a second, my friend that works in street medicine here in the city is truly protecting people. And gets more intense when there's extreme cold and extreme heat. Okay, as an environmental scientist and a sustainability advocate, I can see that as how can we look to do some changes in our environment that will also be protecting not only people, but planet. And so as Adela and I went through and listened to quite a few speakers, the bigger announcements and languages that were resonating were based with planetary health, public health, social determinants of health, how people love and want to be in their communities. So that's what got me thinking. How am I showing up and how am I present? And I think most of the time I am reading and learning and knowing. So one of the examples is participating with the city of La Crosse and all of the alerts that you can get, whether it be snow removal and move your car off the street, or it could be now the agendas that are there for each of the committee meetings, so I can be a better informed citizen. But then there's also the opportunity to find out what is happening, like La Crosse Earth Fair or Juneteenth, and ways to be involved and show up for your friends and neighbors and possibly make new friends. And with that, I realized that we have a ton of plans and we have great intentions, but how do we connect those dots? And again, I am not an expert, but I am asking myself these questions. I'm having the conversations at the kitchen table with my family. And we're kind of like, well, there are things that we can do for our family. And we know that we're part of our house of worship. We've been participating with different programs at like the public library. Most recently, I just did the Dementia Live with the ARDC and the county to kind of learn what my loved ones are going through with Alzheimer's. But they're the experts in so many ways, the people that will work for the city and the county and the state. But I don't really know exactly what they're doing. And I can read these plans, but I don't really know if I'm connecting to how that impacts me and my friends and my neighbors and the people that I don't know, but I think might be part of a vulnerable population. And so there is, for me, there's a gap, okay? We have all of these plans, climate action plan, comprehensive plan, pathways home. We've got great plans and great people that are working on these. And many of you are probably volunteering with that as well. And then we have our houses of worship. We have our neighborhood associations. We might be supporting our kids in their schools or, supporting a fundraiser somehow. And then we have maybe like the people we know that live immediately around us. But who is organizing us in a sense to be ready for the good and the ugly, I think. And as I talk with my kids and my husband, one of the things that we realize is that we have family in Colorado and California and Montana that have been severely impacted by extreme weather with drought and fires. And funny enough, a few years ago, my own family was evacuated from forest fires in the Boundary Waters. And so how are we ready as a family of 5 to support our immediate loved ones or even our neighbors? And we couldn't really answer that except, well, we know where our camping gear is in the basement, And if we had to boil water, I guess we could do that. And we have some temporary shelter if we need that. But that wasn't really enough in those conversations. And so then we got to thinking, okay, what do we need to have social support, health support, financial support, just as our family of 5 alone? And through various conversations and research online, I was able to talk with folks like Catherine Klockmeyer, who's at the Health and Human Services building. I got really curious and I decided to run for county board so I could ask some more questions and be in the room when they have that as well. But ultimately, a social determinant of health is actually written upon in many, many ways. And that includes stable housing, access to healthcare, transportation, social connections, food access, and energy security. So then again, internally looking at my family, okay, what do we have? What can we work on? Where are our resources? And, just kind of like thinking. And then my kids started accusing me of being a prepper. And I'm like, no, I'm not a prepper. I'm just really, really curious. And they're like, oh, Mom, come on. But at the same time, when we have the conversations about what is possible, again, the good and the ugly, are we ready as a family? And I think because we love this earth so much, and believe me, we will be there at the Earth Fair today in amongst multiple concerts, some of the things that I'm asking ourselves as a family is, okay, yeah, maybe a little prepper-ish. Do we have the supplies for, let's say, 72 hours? Yes, I have the same jug of water like in the basement for 2 years, but it hasn't been opened yet. But maybe I'll refresh it and we'll see what else we have. But then also, when kids are in school, they have to come up with fire evacuation plans, right? Where do you meet if there's a fire in your house? And as adults, how often do we actually do that and practice that? But then also, my kids brilliantly twisted it. Okay, where is our fun plan, Mom? How are we going to get out? Where are we going to go? How can we enjoy the nature that we love? Because we have to know our fun plan and where we like to go for these different things of fun. So we talked about it through an aspect of the different elements. So we live pretty close to the bluffs. So for soil and land, we'll go up Clara's Climb. For water, we will go over to the marsh and hang out there and enjoy life. For the sun and the heat, honestly, we thought of it as 2 different things. In the winter, having that genuine campfire in the middle of the winter with neighbors, especially around solstice, that was fun for us, and we really wanted to do that. And then with the wind, the hometown that I come from is Austin, Minnesota. And if you've ever driven I-90 west, you will see a ton of windmills. And while we can't go see the windmills every time, the girls are like, well, we love flying kites. And that is part of our joy, and that is going to be part of our fun plan. But then getting into some of the logistics of what it is that we wanted to do to kind of be better prepared as humans, we thought, well, okay, water in the basement. How are we prepared, right? And if it's really hot and this heat and the sun is there, Adela built a really great relationship with Sue Graff and Wind through the Climate Youth Project. So how are we able to be prepared with that heat? Yeah, we have air conditioning, but do we have the cooling centers that we need? Do we know where to go if our air conditioning were to go kaput? So all of these things we were talking about, but then it was like, okay, what do our neighbors have? And when we first started these conversations, we actually, God rest their souls, we had some neighbors in their 90s that did not have children. And understanding exactly where they were in their life and how we could support them as immediate next door neighbors, but then also the neighbors that we know, but we don't really have these tough conversations with. So how can we have those conversations, and in a sense, almost share resources. And that's where some fun stuff happened when the kids, and mind you, there's my 3 girls, and across the street, there's a young boy and a young girl and 2 other young boys, and then like a block away, there's a family of 4 with boys and girls, and these kids are vivacious and like around the hood. So if you've seen them, you've seen them. But they kind of came together and pooled their own resources and started creating a map of knowing where everyone's house was and who they knew. And if they didn't know somebody, to ask the parents, literally, are these safe places if we're in trouble? Or do we need to use our adults to kind of understand where they're at? So all of this was kind of that self-assessment. And then in thinking about the city's plans and the county's plans, and then knowing that we want to do good and help each other, right? What are we doing in between with the people and places that we love, like house of worship, library, schools? Are they doing assessments? And the answer is yes. And do they communicate that back to us? For me, not necessarily. I had to start asking. And the more I learned, I was like, well, wait, if you have this like emergency management plan at the school, can you teach us a little bit more about that? Because for my own kids, climate anxiety is a thing, especially after being evacuated from the Boundary Waters. But also, I think we're better together if we're better informed. So understanding that self-assessment piece can be applied to the places that we know and love. So what we did with the girls' school was look for local hazards. Like, what are these scenarios that we can plan for? But also, what are the fun things that we plan for? And that was the kids. Like, Mom, we have to have fun. You're going to drag it down if you keep talking doom and gloom. So identifying those things, and yeah, Lynn, you know this, right? You've met my kids too. And then back to the mapping an assessment map of like where the people are that they know, but then also the brilliance of like Google Earth is that they can get online and they can say, okay, I know my library is here, my school is here, my friends live here. We might go to festival or the co-op in these places, so where they can get food, or where larger, bigger picture is, where are those community gardens perhaps? Where are the emergency shelters that are actually laid out really well in these plans, but how do we have that related to our homes and talk about it at the kitchen table or even in our neighborhood associations? Like, do we know where all of this is? And then it got to the point where my kids accused me. They're like, Mom, you know too much, but you don't share it with us. And I was just like, okay. And in talking with my husband, there is a gap of knowledge transfer, not only in the workplace these days, but I think also generation to generation on these simple things that we might have taken for granted. So how can we almost educate up so that we all understand where we're at? And I think in attending things like the Earth Fair today, that is a huge opportunity in order to be able to hear what people are doing and working on. But it's also an opportunity to understand the language that they are sharing, and then the challenge of thinking about that as a way to adjust it to what we think the needs and wants are of our immediate networks. So we wanted to think of a small project as a family, the girls and I. And ultimately, it was taking the map of the Little Free Libraries, with a map of the Little Free Pantries, with a map of the community gardens, or a place where people can have like food access and free meals. And again, part of this is kind of 2.0 of what Adela worked on in understanding what resources are out there for a vulnerable population during extreme weather. But there is so much more out there than we realized. One of the things we found, and this was in our neighborhood, well, across Losey, but pretty close to our neighborhood, is that there is a city orchard over by La Crosse Floral. Now, if you've been on the bike path, you might have seen this. But if you're not walking in that neighborhood or driving by slow, you just go right by it. And there's apple trees and pears and blueberries and raspberries. And now I found out why that's there. However, that's a resource. And we mapped where the YMCA has their food forest. Terrific. And there's other food forests around, actually, which is really, really helpful to know. And not only to give the kids a snack when they're out biking around, but the fact that we can do this on not only city property, but we could do it on our own properties. So thinking about Earth Day today, and if you get the chance to go, that's where it's this is the fun stuff. We get to learn from each other and understand what we can do. So the kids had this small project. In addition to that, we tried to identify those neighbors that we kind of knew but didn't, and Mr. and Mrs. Haley, who have since passed away, what are their needs? And maybe some other neighbors that might have some needs. Does someone need their sidewalk shoveled? Does someone have a garden but they can't take care of it, but they could use some support? How can we share back and forth? So the kids kind of wove in some ideas. There was a bike share plan at the neighborhood level, and we live kind of around the corner from the Market on Market with 21st and Market. That happens once a month. There's a sale. So the kids are okay, well, we sell our brownies there, but maybe we could do more and kind of bring awareness to something. And then that was the next step of building those networks. You have a phenomenal network here. There are houses of worship all over town. That is the network. And then it's how do we coordinate better together? I have no idea, but that's the question I'm asking. How can we coordinate better together? And we've had a lot of interfaith groups, and the beauty of it is starting where we know best is with prayer service like last night. And how can we connect everyone's good intentions to the plans that exist? And I don't know when or how every house of worship has a rummage sale, but it kind of seems that way. My mother-in-law is a member of Crucifixion over in La Crescent, and they always have a huge rummage sale too. But it's that coordinated effort. Okay, now that we've sold all these things, but we have things extra, what do we do with it? And just this week, I ran into Sue, Graff, and Wynn, Sue and Brian, and they were looking for tents and sleeping bags. So if there are kids growing out of their things before this next season, how can that be used to support other folks? And then the kids, my kids, I should say, understand that faith is really important in our family, and we get to talk about that, and that's a huge privilege, and we're very comfortable with that. And then it's oh, Mom, not that language again. But we connect the dots in the sense of a house of worship is literally our beacon of light in a community, I think, because there are so many good things that are done. And it's the lighthouse on dry land, is what my youngest said. And we look at everything that we can do within our house of worship. So a lot of places, and I know here's included, energy audit, the solar panels, but then doing a building walkthrough. What are the different things identified for repairs, or that all levels of all abilities can participate. And then understanding a site assessment in general, the landscaping, if there are repairs that need to be done outside, what is it that we can change? And then what I ended up finding myself, and I'll share this back through Susan and Alyssa, is that there are a ton of resources for faith communities and resilience guides. And I think that's where we have an opportunity to put our city climate action plan and our county climate action plan merged together with faith communities doing these resiliency plans. And in our city plan, it actually references building climate resiliency hubs. And you might ask, what does that mean? It's literally being in community together so that those that need resources at the time of an extreme weather event or just in any climate impact, we have what we need. And it can be very simple as, first aid kits, bottled water, having an idea of where the resources are. If you're forward thinking like the UU with the solar panels, do you have battery backup? Is there a generator in the neighborhood? And so the kids and I were thinking about these things as well. And it came back to communication. We might be able to do these assessments as kind of like a fun checkbox thing, but then how do we share that back with the members of our faith community? So we belong to Roncalli Newman and sometimes go to San Damiano. But how do we share that with people that are maybe there once a week or once a month? And let them know that not only are we asking questions about our house of worship, but that there are so many trusted individuals in the community that are the leaders, like Molly McCormick with the city of La Crosse and the fire station. Like that woman, she came from the Red Cross working on emergency planning, and now she's with the city and she's phenomenal. She also does their social media, so that's really fun for the fire department. But, how do we connect with these people that have information? And how can we share that amongst ourselves in a house of worship and in our neighborhoods and then at the kitchen table? So I think a few of the things to build these climate resiliency hubs are looking at the opportunities that we have going on right now. If a house of worship is doing a major renovation, what are some of the budget items that I could request Father Billy add and present to the executive committee? In the school district, we're building a brand new school less than a mile from here. How is that school designed for the community and building in the resilience? Yes, I think it's going to have geothermal and solar and, passive energy perspectives, but are we setting ourselves up as a community, because it's so centrally located, that we can actually have that emergency shelter capacity, that we have community accessible spaces in general? But again, thinking of the needs that we have, whether it be a water filtration system that is separate from the city, should there be some contamination with flooding, or just backup power if we have like a major snowstorm. We also have the renovation at the library. And I know that there's funding that still needs to be had so that they can finish the other part of it. But obviously the library is a very near and dear place for people in the wintertime for warming. How can we think about that, not as a burden, but as an opportunity to build community and have those spaces and places together through that climate lens? And that self-assessment is what we can start with. There's also parks and community centers that you may not think about, but is there a way to shift or share resources, whether it be, the warming center or someplace that's just a park with shade and accessible water and drinking fountains or bubblers. So we have quite a few opportunities here in the city. And ultimately, I think as Citizen Beth, I'm trying to ask these questions of how can I be involved? How can I help translate that not only to my family, but also to my house of worship within my network? How can I be better supporting the efforts that are already existing? And who can we learn from in the city, but then also in the region or the state or in the upper Midwest? So as I shared at the very beginning, I got to go to this Midwest Climate Resiliency Conference. And there's a ton going on, whether it be in Wisconsin or Minnesota or Iowa or Illinois. And we shouldn't have to wait until these big conferences happen with just the experts being able to attend. how can we weave that into the other things that we're doing at a community level or within the networks that we have? So, for example, if a diocese, Catholic diocese, was gathering people to talk about caring for a vulnerable population, how can we weave that into like caring for the communities that they're in and not only the churches that they say that they're serving, right? And then nationally, there are some phenomenal places that are doing things and have a lot of different resiliency hubs. So Baltimore, Portland, Oregon, and then New York City. They all have strong sustainability departments. Those departments ask and work with other departments of like, what is it that you need? We will hold this list for you, but we will not be able to do the work, but we can help coordinate what the work is and what the communities need. So those were 3 great examples that I've read about in the past. And then obviously the only way to get this done is through creative funding. And we cannot always rely on federal grants, right? But how can we be creative in those conversations of learning each other's language to then also share the resources that we might know about that could help further that line item in multiple budgets that make it attainable slowly but surely. And so one of the things that my kids and I have as a beginning place is to know our neighbors' names. And then at a congregation, I think we have an opportunity to understanding, who needs help and when. And a lot of houses of worship do this, but is it all up here or is it written? And that's where having conversations, I think, is really important. And then it's with the city and the county is that opportunity to bridge those examples of what they know community members need, but then also what they have as offered services, because the service might be there, but we just don't know how to connect folks to it. And when the kids and I have come back to this plan, and I try not to burn them out too much, but it pops up every once in a while. I say, where are we at with the goal that we had to learn everyone's name? Oh, I met this person so-and-so because they were out, walking their dog, and I love dogs. Okay, great place to start. And my kids are starting where they're at. For me, it's, okay, now that I'm on county board, who can I talk to learn more and then share that back with the people that live in my neighborhood and then with other county board members that are also new like myself. So plans, I think, will only come alive when we know that people are doing the work or communicating that the work is getting done. And so I really appreciate just kind of being able to share my journey here of like asking the questions and understanding the little bit that I know, but I would just love to kind of keep having conversations with multiple houses of worship of being like, what are we doing? How can we do this better? What are the dots that we need to connect? What do you know about that I should know about? And could that carry goodness, always goodness, forward? So that's just kind of my curiosity that I want to share with you. So thank you all.